Okay, I started the recording. So I just want to say welcome everybody um, from what? CSL, Texas Hill Country. We're glad you're joining us this day and this happy Father's Day. And I'd like to give a shout out to all the fathers out there and say happy day to all of our fathers and our grandfathers, our godfathers, and others who have served in that role of father. And but before we acknowledge you, I want to share the contents of one of the best Father's Day cards uh, that was ever received. And I had this in my notes, and it read, Dad, thanks to your lectures, I've never changed horses in the middle of a job worth doing. And I know the squeaky wheel gets the worm, and I never count my chickens until I've walked a mile in their shoes. And you thought I wasn't listening. Yes, Dads, thanks for all the good advice. So let's take a moment actually to acknowledge and honor all of our fathers in this Zoom room and all of the grandfathers and all of the godfathers. And now any male who has served in the role of a father to a child, including furry children. And finally, any female who has served in the role of father as well. So happy Father's Day. And let's just rub our hands together and nice and warm and energized with love, and just give the fathers all around the world a warmth of love, and to every father. And repeat after me. We honor you.
Honor you.
We thank you.
Thank you.
We forgive you for when you missed the mark. We celebrate you for when you got it right. We appreciate you. We love you. Happy Father's Day. So, hooray for all the fathers out there. Well, during this month, we've been exploring the topic of it's all good and it's all God. But have you ever noticed that on the way to our good, change seems to be inevitable? So, why do you suppose that is true? Do you know? Because spirit is forever and ever desiring to express in greater and greater ways. And spirit desires to be expressed more fully, more completely, and more wholly than it currently is. And because we each have a spark of divinity at our core, we want that also, whether we realize it or not. There is something in us that is always urging us forward. And in fact, in the little book of quotes from Ernest Holmes, which is entitled Keys to the Kingdom, he wrote this: We constantly discard old ideas and take on new and better ones. The mind gives us no rest. The instinct urges us on. The intuition draws us upward. And he also wrote in the Science of Mind textbook, the desire arises from the necessity of the universe to become self-expressed. So last week, Jeannie spoke about changes coming at us quickly and how to breathe into them. Things have changed, haven't they? And how things have changed over the years. And I say, thank goodness. But here are a few things that have changed for good. Did you know that in the 1500s, they cooked in a big kettle that always hung over the fire? And every day they lit the fire and added things to the pot. They ate mostly vegetables and did not get much meat. They would eat the stew for dinner, leaving leftovers in the pot to get cold overnight and then start over the next day. And sometimes the stew had food in it that had been there for quite a while, hence the rhyme: peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot, 9 days old. That's a fact that's where that saying came from. And let's see, here's another one. Sometimes they could obtain pork, which made them feel quite special. And when visitors came over, they would hang up their bacon to show off. And it was a sign of wealth that a man could bring home the bacon. As a very special treat, they would cut off a little to share with guests, and then they would all sit around and chew the fat. So lead cups were used to drink ale or whiskey. And the combination of the lead poisoning and alcohol would sometimes knock them out for a couple of days. And someone walking along the road would take them for dead and prepare them for burial. They were laid out on the kitchen table for a couple of days, and the family would gather around and eat and drink and wait to see if they would wake up, hence the custom of holding a wake. Now, in England is an old and small, and they started out running out of places to bury people. And so they would dig up coffins and reuse the grave. And when reopening these coffins, 1 out of 25 coffins were found to have scratch marks on the inside, and they realized they had been burying people alive. So they decided to tie a string on the wrist of the corpse, lead it through the coffin and up through the ground, and tie it to a bell. And someone would then be assigned to sit out on the graveyard all night, thus creating the term the graveyard shift, to listen for the bell. And someone could then be saved by the bell or was considered a dead ringer. Now, these are facts that I got out of where these sayings came from on the internet. You can find anything on the internet. But how things have changed, and I would say thank goodness for that. And so today, we're going to take a look at 5 ways that we call forth change in our lives. And because we do it, remember this, the mind gives us no rest. Our mind is working at all times. And that's just that instinct urging us on. The intuition draws us upward. In other words, everything is created twice, first in the mind and then in form. And your mind is always active. So as we look at each of these ways, we'll see if we can't embrace the change rather than fear it. We call it good and very good instead of bad and scary. And if we can't go that far this morning, let's see if we can at least look at changes in our lives as molehills instead of mountains. There was a man that walked into the ladies' department store of Macy's, and he shyly walked up to the woman behind the counter and said, "I'd like to buy a bra for my wife." "What type of bra?" asked the clerk. "Type?" required the man. "There is more than one type." "Look around," said the sales lady as she showed him a sea of bras in every shape, size, color, and form and material. Actually, even with all of these variety, there are really only 3 types of bras, replied the sales clerk. Confused, the man asked about the types, and the sales lady replied, "Well, there's the Catholic type, the Salvation Army type, and the Baptist type. Which one do you need?" Still confused, the man asked, "What is the difference between them?" The lady responded, "It is all really quite simple. You see, the Catholic type supports the masses, The Salvation Army type lifts up the fallen. And the Baptist type makes mountains out of molehills. And I get being raised Baptist, I can say that. But today, at a minimum, I want us to look at turning mountains into molehills. And the 5 ways we call forth change in our lives could also be entitled the 5 ways we use the law of attraction. What is the law of attraction? Well, God is always creating. Thus, we are always creating. Form is always changing. Everything is energy. It just changes form. We and our experiences are always changing. So as we look at these 5 ways the law of attraction works in our lives, we can realize that every change that occurs in our lives comes from one of these causes, and every change is an opportunity to connect more deeply with the truth of our own divinity and to express God more fully. And the first one is we attract what we are. Every person, everything, every place, every business has a certain mental atmosphere of its own. The atmosphere decides what is to be drawn to it. And remember this, like attracts like. And in the chapter on the law of attraction, Ernest Holmes says this: we each automatically attract to ourselves just what we are. And we may set it down that whatever we are, however intolerable the situation may be, we are just where we belong. So everything is as it should be. And that may sound a little harsh, but I don't think it was meant to be, but rather simply meant to be a statement of fact. We belong there by right of consciousness. We often operate from this place alone when we are spiritually asleep. I know I did for many years. As an example, I could be very judgmental, unforgiving, very critical, and demanding in my relationships. And that's exactly what I got. Partners that were judgmental, unforgiving, critical, and demanding. You attract what you are. And if we don't like where we are, we can change it. This, of course, is a powerful and profound realization we come to when we first become attuned to the new thought principles. And when we recognize this, we begin to change consciously and consciously court change in our lives. Isn't that what we do every time we pray? Do a prayer treatment. But Holmes goes on to write in the textbook, there is no power in the universe but ourselves that can free us. Thus, we should definitely daily, using our own name, declare the truth about ourselves, realizing that we are reflecting our statements into consciousness and that they will be operated upon by it. There is a good in this universe, and I ought to have it. Emma Curtis Hopkins. We will look at the second and third ways together because they are 2 sides of the same coin. The second one is we attract that which we desire, or that which we do not desire. Wherever the focus is. And Diane May sent me a cartoon that talked about an Indian boy that was having the war of the wolves. One was good and one was evil. And the chief told him, he asked which one's going to win. And the chief said, whichever one you feed. So we attract that which we desire, or we attract what we do not desire. depends on which of those has the greater amount of energy attached to it. Often, that which we do not desire, that which we don't want to happen, is what gets the energy. Is it not? Isn't that what we frequently worry about? Instead of declaring what we do desire, like we do in prayer treatment. But Ernest Holmes wrote again in the Science of Mind textbook, we have the ability to choose what we will do with our lives and are unified with a law which automatically produces our choices. While we do not have the ability to destroy the idea of ourselves, we do have the ability to deface it and to make it appear discordant, but we cannot destroy the divine image. We live in a universe of love as well as a universe of law. One is the complement of the other. The universe of love, pulsating with feeling, with emotion, and the universe of law, the executor of all feeling and all emotion. How the creation of change we desire comes about. Thomas Trord wrote about it in his Edinburgh lectures. And he said this: first, the whole train of causation, which is change, is started by some emotion which gives rise to desire. And Trord goes on to list the steps of decision making, which is the change process, as emotion, which ignites desire. Then our internal judgment approves of the desire and initiates the will to direct the imagination to create a spiritual prototype, which we call a mental equivalent, and keeps the imagination centered on the mental equivalent, which then creates the spiritual nucleus that forces the law of attraction to demonstrate the finished creation. It's quantum physics. And as Albert Einstein told us, everything is energy. And let's make the originating emotion love instead of fear. A love of a greater possibility rather than a fear of loss or change. You know, Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, in his book on Talks on Truth, wrote this: many who have found the law of true thinking and its effect wonder why supply does not come to them after months and years of holding thoughts of bounty. It is because they have not developed love. They have formed the right image in mind, but the magnet that draws the substance from the storehouse of being, love, has not been set into action. The emotion of love has not been set into motion, into action. Number 4, I attract that which has a healing for me. This is so important, I think. The divine spark within us that wants to express something sometimes pulls things into our experience to allow us to heal a false belief so that spirit can shine forth more brightly. And we often call those things our lessons. We do know that the universe first reaches out its hand to us. And then if we don't pay attention, it may tap us on the shoulder. And then it gives us a little shove from behind. And then finally hits us on the head with that old cosmic 2x4 if we really don't wake up. But if it's in your sacred contract to learn that lesson, you will learn it one way or another. But a greater expression of spirit requires a change. You must change. There's no such thing as positive growth and greater expression without change. And we must learn to be comfortable with change if we are going to experience greater freedom. And lots of change means you're growing, you're shifting, and the world is responding to your change in consciousness. It's okay. Relax. You can trust life, you can trust yourself, and you can trust God. Remember that no matter how great or extensive the outward change may be, the principle of God and God's life never changes. So don't be disturbed by changes in your affairs. Make the most of those changes by recognizing their purpose to take you higher in spirit. To take you higher in spirit. Remember this. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the human experience has a birth date and a death date. The spiritual experience has everlasting life. And we are here to grow in consciousness. And you will never be called on to make a change unless you are ready to make that change. Or, as my spiritual mentor once told me, God will never give you more than you are capable of handling. And the Bible tells us that as well. But of course, you know, Mother Teresa added this phrase to that statement. I wish he didn't trust me so much. And let us not listen to the fears that want to crowd into our minds, but let us listen to the spirit within that tells us that we are capable of doing whatever is needed. And let us remember that wherever we are, God is, and God is good. And wherever we are, so is the divine flow of life, of creativity. I attract that for which I have a healing to give. I attract that for which I have a healing to give. I'm going to tell you a story about a congregant that came out in our ministerial practice lessons. It's about a girl named Sarah, but Sarah was hospitalized for probably the umpteenth time. She was feeling a little despondent over the fact. And she started asking God, why God? Why this again? And she cried it out as she tried to sleep. And she awakened the next morning with a heavy heart, discouraged over her body's frailty and the seeming cruel joke of the universe to put her in such a body. But despite her physical condition, Kathy had a certain radiance about her. There was a smile that would light up the room, and her laugh was infectious. She had been a student of these teachings for many years, and even in her moments of despair, she knew at her soul's level that there was always good in her neighborhood. And this attitude seeped through all she did. On the morning she awoke, discouraged, a nurse walked in her room and said, "You always have such a wonderful attitude, and I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind going into the next room and talking to that patient. She could use a little bit of what you have." And Kathy did just that. And in the course of the conversation with this person, she realized that she was living her calling to be a ray of light and hope for those experiencing long-term physical challenges and chronic pain. She knew that she came into this life to experience, to be of support to others. The interesting and, oh, how usual side note to this story is shortly after Sarah had that realization, her physical condition dramatically improved, and she was sprung from the hospital with renewed health and vitality. She became what she was. So let's not resist change in whatever form it may come, or for whatever reason it may. People are coming in and out. I'm sorry. So let's not resist the change in whatever form it may come, or for whatever reason it comes. But instead, let's give thanks for the change as a chance to grow and progress. And sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes that's hard to do. Let us not be afraid of change, but rather let us be ready to make each change a step forward to a new understanding of success, happiness, and the joy of living. And it's these science of mind principles that help make change easy. So let us know that we are grounded in the change by the changeless. Let us know that it's all small change. It's all small change. Now, I'm calling on each of you and every one of you to reach down inside of yourselves and ask, am I willing to embrace change in order to experience a greater degree of happiness? Am I willing to move through change in order to experience the miracles that God has for me? And are you ready and willing to move on into greater freedom than you have ever experienced before? Are you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Let me hear you say yes.
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 Then you're on your way. And I say namaste.
Awesome. Thank you, Reverend Beth. You know something though, with change, even though it can be an expectation of something positive, often something has to die.
Yes.
Something has to be swept away. And I think that's the part that scares me the most.
Right.
Is also that makes it more challenging. And sometimes, I avoid it so I don't have to go through that process of letting something go, because it's just like a vacuum. You have to remove something to allow something more to come in. Like just things in